I make absolutely no secret of the fact that Two-Face is my favourite Batman villain, mostly because of the way he was characterised in the seminal Batman the Animated Series. There, Harvey Dent was a man that was trying to do the right thing by clearing organised crime from Gotham City, but his struggles with his own mental health led to a terrible accident that scarred his body and shattered his mind. It also helped that he had a neat radical design that took the basic elements of the original character, a man split down the middle with two distinctive sides, but made it far easier on the eye. So you may understand why I felt a little bit of apprehension when the new Batman cartoon, Batman Caped Crusader, announced that they would be introducing a different take on the binary Mr. Dent, one that was perhaps less tragic, but still complex. One of the things I really liked about Beatas's version of Harvey Dent is that he made a handful of appearances prior to his transformation, which, at the time, fleshed out his character and made his dramatic decline all the more impactful. And I think that the writers on Caped Crusader felt similarly, because Harvey Dent features very prominently throughout the first season of the show, way more than he did in Beatas. In fact, there are only 2 episodes that he doesn't appear in. Oh, I see what they did there. This Harvey Dent is the district attorney, and he is running for mayor on a campaign of cleaning up the corruption in Gotham. The issue is that he is directly involved in Gotham's corruption. He may not take bribes, but he knows where all the bodies are buried, both figuratively and literally. Their Dent is no paragon of virtue by any means, but of the corrupt officials in Gotham, he's probably the cleanest. And I really like how the courthouse where Dent has an office has a perpetual shadow cast over half of it, nicely foreshadowing future events. Harvey Dent is presented as the opposite of Barbara Gordon, the idealistic public defender, where Barbara asks the jury to act rationally when issuing sentences and asks that offenders be treated fairly. Dent plays by his own rules. For instance, he cut a deal with Selina Kyle to let her off with a warning, completely undermining detectives Bullock and Flass, who had caught her in the act. But he didn't do this because Selina had paid him off, he did it because he enjoyed demonstrating his power to Gotham's elites, and ultimately because he didn't view the crimes of the Catwoman as anything that serious. The moment she broke the rules again, they threw the book at her. Likewise, when Bruce Wayne assaulted a journalist that made a remark about how foolish it was to wear expensive jewellery and walk around the East End at night, Dent ensured that Wayne was sent to therapy, rather than facing a more serious punishment. Harvey Dent is not impartial by any means, and he favours society's elites. One of the small details that I found noteworthy about this Harvey Dent is the fact that he lives in a small apartment, not some palatial home or a house in the suburbs. He very clearly isn't some wealthy elite, and I think that goes some of the way towards explaining why he's so keen to make deals with Gotham's higher-ups. They don't explicitly state what Dent's background was, but he clearly wants to be in the same social circles as the people that run the city. At the same time, I'm fairly certain he could probably afford to live in a larger home, but I think the fact that he lives in Gotham City adds an element of authenticity to his claims of wanting to clean the city up. He sees the crime and the poverty on his doorstep, and he wants to do something about it. And he argues that he can change the system from within, when really, the system changes him. Although, when he talks about this ambition, it sounds more like a canned statement for the press rather than an authentic desire. Maybe it was once, but now it's just a slogan. It's also worth noting that this version of Harvey Dent was not mentally unwell before he was assaulted. He's charming, quick-witted, arrogant, and ambitious. And it's his ambitions that would ultimately lead to his downfall. After a series of gaffes, including one of his press events being robbed by the Gentleman Ghost, Dent is trailing in the polls, loses endorsements, and the essential funding they bring with them. Rather than accepting that he has lost the election, instead, he accepts an offer he knows he should steer clear from. The gangster, Rupert Thorne, funds Dent's campaign in exchange for an undisclosed favour at a later point in time, and it's clear that Dent isn't happy about this arrangement. Thorne eventually comes knocking, asking for Dent to drop a case against one of his associates that had conned thousands of Gothamites out of their life savings. While Dent initially agrees to the deal, when the time comes, he has a change of heart and demands that the accused be held without bail. And this is essentially the birth of Two-Face, an act of defiance and betrayal. And yet, as an audience, we cheer for him doing the right thing, even if he did already spend that money. From Thorne's perspective, Dent had betrayed him by taking his money and not upholding the bargain, and this could not stand. In response to this, Thorne sends one of his henchmen, Tony Zito, to deliver a message to Dent by throwing acid in his face. Following his disfigurement, Dent resigns as district attorney and drops out of the mayoral race, locking himself away in his apartment, drinking excessively, eating takeout, and vomiting. One thing that's important to note is that traditionally Two-Face's disfigurement has been on the left side of his face. However, this time, it's the right side. His pristine left side is the angry, bitter, murderous part of him. That was a very deliberate choice, with Bruce Timm noting that he didn't like the implication that people that are disfigured or otherwise unconventional looking are inherently villainous. Dent's personality split is also handled differently. There is an inner conflict within Dent, a softer, meeker side to him, who believes that he deserved to lose everything after all the wrong he had done over his career. Dare we call him his conscience? However, the dominant side of his personality is the vengeful Harvey Dent, and this fracture between his two sides comes to the forefront in one of the strongest scenes in the entire series. Realizing that his friend needs help, whether he wants it or not, Batman visits Harvey and encourages him to return to his regular routine to bring a sense of normality back to his life. Batman's intentions aren't entirely noble. He also wants to find out who assaulted Dent so that he can punish them. But it's clear that Harvey isn't ready to be out in public yet. Batman ignores this and drags him to their favourite restaurant. And just look how Dent stews under the pressure of being out in public. He claims that he can feel people staring at him and hear them whispering about him, when in reality, no one is paying him any attention. It's not just a budgetary restriction that the background characters aren't really moving. They are literally paying no attention to him at all. And yet, he is deeply self-conscious. And the anxiety he feels about other people's gaze is entirely in his own mind. When he receives well wishes from two of his peers, we get a glimpse at how deeply disturbed he has become. While he is polite to their faces, the moment they leave earshot, his real thoughts come out, calling one a jealous little worm, the other a smug bastard, wishing he could cut the smile right off of his face, showing how two-faced he can be. I think that we all have that voice in our heads, the part of us that has an initial reaction to something that can sometimes be mean. I don't know about the rest of you, but in my mind that initial reaction is usually immediately followed by a more balanced, rational thought. But in Dent's case, the reactionary part of himself is becoming the dominant personality. It all comes to a head when a waitress comes over to ask if everything was okay with their food, but Dent explodes at her, interpreting her question as an attempt to pry into his injury, and he responds by dramatically removing his facial bandage, giving everyone a good look at his new face, especially that poor waitress. One of the things I love about Dent's descent into madness is that it was entirely avoidable and was such a trivial event, going out for dinner, but his own anxiety and wounded sense of self just spirals out of control. It's a situation entirely of Batman's making. He knew that Dent was feeling vulnerable, but he forced him to go out before he was ready, all because he wanted to avenge Dent. He felt that by taking him somewhere familiar, yet public, he'd be able to coax the information out of him, never realising that the pressure would cause his mind to snap. At the end of the day, while Harvey Dent is responsible for going on the murderous campaign of revenge, it was Batman that put him in that position. And that's not the only wonderful scene in this episode. Harvey Dent starts to target Thorn and his men. As someone that was involved in the corruption of the city, he's aware of who the players are and how to find them. While he is all too quick to resort to violence when dealing with Thorn's men, he still possesses some soft skills. When trying to find Tony, he forces his way into the apartment of Tony's girlfriend, and is seen menacingly looming over her in a bid to get information. When Batman arrives on the scene, we learn that Dent had given her a ton of cash to get her out of Gotham in exchange for Tony's location. We had just seen him begrudgingly beat one of Thorn's men for calling him a freak, so it's kind of surprising to see him use a far gentler tactic. If this were any other version of Two-Face, he would have decided how to act based upon the flip of his two-headed coin. But Caped Crusader's two-headed coin has a very different purpose. It's not a symbol of duality. He doesn't have an obsession with twos. It's more a tool that he uses to give the illusion of chance, when in reality, he is in control. When we first met him, he joked to Barbara about flipping the coin to decide what sentence to recommend for her client. Heads, 20 years. Tails, the death penalty. As it's a double-headed coin, the answer is a foregone conclusion, but nobody else knows that. We only see Dent use the coin one other time in the episode The Killer Inside Me, where he confronts a mugger and asks the victim what punishment he should dish out. Heads, he'll hand him over to the cops. Tails, he'll kill him. Again, there's no way that Tails could come up. His coin doesn't have a scarred side. It's all about giving people the illusion of chance, when in reality, Dent already knows what's going to happen. It's an unnecessary question though, because the victim of the crime refuses to bet a man's life on the toss of a coin, and so Dent compromises by shooting the mugger in the knee and calling the police. Likewise, Dent's two personalities tend to come and go as they please. After he brutally murders Tony and his two bodyguards, Dent takes a moment in his car to catch his breath, muttering to himself that he can't believe he actually killed them. It's worth noting that the two sides of Dent don't have separate names. There's no Big Bad Harv in this show. It's just Harvey Dent and the other guy. the one who thinks he deserved what happened to him, who wants to retreat from public life and hates violence. There's a very subtle distinction between the voices of Harvey Dent and the other guy. While Dent is more confident and smarmy, the other guy is more soft-spoken and timid. It's a neat inversion of what most other actors have done when playing Two-Face. Usually, Two-Face has a rough voice to match the scarred side of his face. Here, the voice matches the pain and anxiety that Dent experienced after being victimised. It's the voice of a traumatised person. When Batman finally catches up to Dent, stopping him from murdering Rupert Thorne and his son Matthew, Dent completely falls apart as the other guy takes over and surrenders himself to Batman's custody. Dent is eventually taken to Arkham, and both he and the other guy are in agreement that he is not of sound mind. While in Arkham, he reverts back to his self-pitying phase, lamenting how his life was taken away from him, and maybe, just maybe, he deserved it. Both Batman and Barbara Gordon tried to persuade him to take a deal, testify to the scale of the corruption within Gotham in exchange for a lighter sentence, but Dent and the other guy don't believe they deserve mercy. They deserve to have the book thrown at them. And it's interesting to see that Harvey Dent, the prosecutor, judges himself as harshly as he judged the people he put in prison, and has to be persuaded to take the deal. Of course, Gotham being Gotham, there is no way that Dent would be able to testify against the city officials. He gets sprung from prison by Bullock and Flass, who intend to hand him over to Rupert Thorne's men and turn a blind eye to what happens next. Fortunately, Dent knows exactly what's going on, which makes you wonder how many times something like this had happened previously, and is able to escape from the bungling detectives by cannily pointing out that Bullock seems to be Flass's flunky, which doesn't sit well with Bullock. In the commotion, Dent kicks Bullock in the back of the head, causing the car to crash, and he makes his escape. However, rather than being able to go on another murderous rampage, Dent finds himself shackled to Barbara Gordon, literally his conscience by his side, preventing him from going too far. What follows is a love letter to the noir genre, with Barbara connected to Dent, meeting Commissioner Gordon, Renee Montoya, and Batman down the docks in the middle of the night, encased in a dense fog. The group are pursued by 15 of Thorne's men, including Bullock and Flass. While Dent is reluctant to cooperate with them, he believes that corruption is too rooted in Gotham. Take down just one of them and 100 more will line up to replace them. Batman doesn't care. Neither version of Dent fully commits to the plan. While Dent wants to split up and lure Thorne's men to their deaths, the other guy just wants to ensure that none of the others are hurt protecting him because he doesn't think he deserves their protection. In the chaos that ensues, Dent takes a bullet to the side, forcing Barbara to drag him back to her car, where she hopes she'll be able to get him help. However, Flass was lying in wait. And it's ironic that the double-crossing Mr. Dent gets shot in the back by Flass after the other guy shields Barbara with his own body, effectively killing him and leaving a confused Dent bleeding out on the floor. When asked why he did it, why he sacrificed himself to save her, Dent responds,
"Damned if I know. Barbara."
And he genuinely didn't know. Harvey Dent didn't sacrifice himself to save Barbara, the other guy did. It was a very bold move to kill off Two-Face, one of Batman's most recognisable villains, but it is entirely indicative of the kind of show Caped Crusader wants to be. They put the story they wanted to tell ahead of the established continuity or our perceptions of who the characters should be and how they should act. While Harvey Dent was supposed to be a beacon of hope in Gotham City, someone that promised to bring about real change, it was just a slogan. Harvey Dent may not have murdered anyone or swindled anyone out of their life savings, but he was still corrupt. He knew exactly what was going on in Gotham City and could have spoken out at any point, but never did. Sure, he wasn't as corrupt as the others, but he was still corrupt. Having said that, Dent's demise did bring about one significant change. He changed Batman. Batman arrived too late to save Dent, but he was able to stop Flass from shooting Barbara. Upon seeing the carnage, Batman picked up Flass's gun, and for a very brief second, it appeared that Batman was about to murder Flass for what he had done, much in the same way that Dent had murdered the people that wronged him. However, Batman showed a measure of restraint by simply shooting around Flass, letting him know that he could have killed him at any point he wanted to before knocking him out. This leads to the closing moments of the series where Batman sits in his cave, thinking about how he recognised something of himself in Dent as he went on his murderous campaign of revenge. This is the eye-opening moment that Batman needed, and he starts to open up and feel things again. And that was Harvey Dent's role in this series, to be the catalyst for Batman's growth, and to demonstrate that his crusade of punishment only has one outcome. It's very telling that not once in this series is Harvey Dent referred to as Two-Face, and I have desperately tried to avoid calling him that in this video, because he is unlike any other version of the character we've seen previously. While I do think it would have been good if his dissociative identity disorder could have been expanded on more thoroughly, I do enjoy that the catalyst that broke his mind was something so mundane and completely avoidable. And it's noteworthy that the personality that was the cruelest and most violent was the man that had been there all along. This is the man that Harvey Dent was deep down inside, and he came to the surface when Dent decided to go on his own crusade of revenge. He may not have been able to testify to the scale of corruption within Gotham, but his sacrifice showed Batman the man he was supposed to be. And maybe, just maybe, that will do more good for Gotham than any trial ever could. Okay, that's it for this video essay. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd like to hear more about Batman Caped Crusader, why not check out our podcast Totally Shui Flipside, where my wife and I have gone through all 10 episodes. This is a spoiler-filled conversation about each episode in sequential order, so only check this out if you've watched the show or if you have no intentions of ever watching it yourself. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month, which will grant you early access to my video essays and some supplementary perks like custom emojis, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, and community posts. And special thanks to my current channel members, who are all listed on the screen right now. Okay, so this was my last video about the costumed supervillains of Batman Caped Crusader. However, next time I'm going to be going to look at some of the very worst villains from this series, Detectives Bullock and Flass. I wanted to hold off from talking about their villainy until I'd had a chance to talk about what they'd done to Harvey Dent. So now that's out of the way, we're going to talk about how vile and irredeemable they are. Hope to see you then.